$400,000 as a percentage of 145 million, as it would have been last season, is peanuts. Maybe literal peanuts in the case of Red Bull, but it's not enough to give them a second and a half of advantage, is it?
Yeah, Mercedes dominated for a long time, but there was always competition. That was always there. Whereas this year there is literally nothing at all. It's been Red Bull from race 1 to now.
Big if Max Verstappen continues to dominate, imagine he just goes and wins all the remaining races this season. The advertising value, Shez, will absolutely drop. It's just a matter of how much buy, right?
And if they are smart about this, they won't keep trying to go down that route. They will find another way to garner interest in Formula One, because doing what they are trying to do right now is not going to work. Physics does not work that way.
The 25% don't care about that. They don't care about Max Verstappen's short cornering. They're not fussed about how I don't know how Lewis pulled off the switchback on Alonso. They don't care about these. And no amount of God tier level storytelling will get someone to care. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Shakedown. With me, as always, co-host, my esteemed colleagues, my right honourable friends, Baxty B and Chezinho. How are we doing today, fellas?
Good, thanks, mate.
It doesn't matter how you're doing.
Every week he does this.
I know, I'm making a habit out of it. So rude. Baxy's like, what are you doing, Cameron? How rude. How dare you? Why are we even on this show if we're
One of these days, Cameron, I'm going to get you with that in mind.
Oh my gosh, mate. That is going to be brilliant. Go on then, chaps. Let's talk some F1. We need to talk some F1 because there is a lot going, or let's say there's been a lot going on over the last 24 hours, right? Somebody put a mic in front of the face of Lewis Hamilton and talked about rule changes. Techie, eh? To which Lewis Hamilton responded, "It sucks." The rule change that Lewis Hamilton proposed is that because Red Bull are so dominant that they shouldn't be allowed to focus on their design or the design of their 2024 car until at the very least after August that year. Shez, to that, sir, you reacted how?
So I reacted to it in the same way that I would to somebody saying something outrageous, which is that I don't agree with you, but I am happy and I respect your right to say what you want to say. And I think that's important because immediately after he said this, there was the cries of this is hypocrisy rang out loud from all quarters, and I definitely thought that was a little bit rich. So I mean, just to deal with that side of things first. The sort of narrative immediately afterwards was, how can somebody that's benefited from 7 or 8 years of utter dominance now complain about somebody else's dominance? Well, to that I would say that both he acknowledged even during the time that he was in a dominant position that's what it was, and that he could see that it was boring, and that he welcomed changes to change that, because even he wanted a bit more of a challenge. That's documented 2015 and 2019, and on top of that, his competitors, Red Bull in particular, were clamoring for the FIA to make changes. There's a quote from 2015 where Christian Horner brings up that the FIA have an equalization method that they should look into, and that was a year into their domination. So that side of the thing is one thing. In terms of the actual content of what he said, I'm going to come down on my usual on the usual side of the argument I normally come down on, which is that I didn't really appreciate Red Bull wanting to peg back Mercedes at the time that Mercedes were dominant, and in the same way, I don't like to see a runaway competitor pegged back now. So I don't agree with what Lewis has said, but I'm sure I'm I'm sure I'm in for a bit of an argument on that one. Can't
Mate,
wait.
Baxty, talk to me before I rage against the Shez machine. Give me your reaction, Baxty. What did you make of Lewis's comments?
I think you might be fighting on two fronts here, Cam. No, basically, I mean, I know that I've said that I think Red Bull should be pegged back, but I've come at that from a position of, well, the FIA have always pegged back a dominant team, so that's what they'll do. I don't actually necessarily think that they should. I think, F1 is about innovation, and it's about, the best teams getting it right and competing against one another. And right now, Red Bull are the only team that have got it really right. We can see Mercedes are making gains. We can see that Aston Martin are making gains. Ferrari seem to be getting a little bit better. But quite frankly, not doing a massive rule change just to hurt Red Bull, or doing a massive rule change to hurt Red Bull would be silly, in my view. I understand where Lewis is coming from, and I appreciate that why people have said, oh, he's a hypocrite for this. I agree with Shez as well. Lewis has been on record to say, look, I think it should be better. But I think we need to come at this from a position of, look at where we are in 2023 in comparison to where we were during the Mercedes dominance. In the Mercedes dominance, the first 3 years, pretty clear cut. Mercedes were the best team by a long, long way. But what we also had is we had an inter-team battle between two drivers who grew up together. Boom. And you had a title fight for 3 years. 2015 was a bit of a blowout, but 2014 and 2016 certainly you had a title fight. The following year, big rule change. Ferrari get it right, challenge Mercedes for 2 years. Everyone forgets this, that Sebastian Vettel realistically probably should have won at least one of those championships, if not both of them. And yet, certainly in 2018, found a way to absolutely bottle it. And then, 2019 and 2020, Mercedes dominated. That was the only 2 years, really, where there was no competition. So for Red Bull to turn around and say, oh, no, Lewis was never saying that during his domination. A, he did. And then B, you spent 7 years bitching and moaning about wanting to leave the sport and, saying that, finding every trick in the book to try and slow Mercedes down, be it banning party modes, be it saying that they had a flexing rear wing, in 2021, even though it clearly wasn't, doing everything in their power to throttle Mercedes rather than actually getting their act together and getting it right. And it took them 8 years to get there. And then when they got there, they still needed the biggest save in history from a race director, without laboring that point too hard. Lewis, I agree with Shez that we shouldn't be slowing down Red Bull, and that Lewis was just asked for his opinion and gave it. That's absolutely fine. I don't actually necessarily think Lewis's idea was a bad one, but will they ever do it? I don't know. It's something the FIA would. That suggestion sounds like something the FIA would do, personally, but I don't know.
Oh, Baxty, say it how you mean it, fella. Why don't you? It's techie. So, Shez, let me come back to you first, mate, because You said you were outraged at Lewis Hamilton's comments or something to that effect.
Not outraged, I just didn't agree with it.
Go on. What? Okay, so I knew that we were going to have this row because I know deep down you're Peter Windsor's brother from another mother, right? Like you think the same way. You're a purist, and so to it's almost sacrilege to do this artifice thing, right, and peg back somebody that's nailed it. Because that's what Adrian Newey's Red Bull RB19 of that. They've killed it. They have killed it, and it does feel a bit unfair. But Shez, and this is the point that I was arguing with Peter, mate. Ultimately, this is entertainment now as much as it is sport. Sadly for us diehards who've been watching since 2000 BC or whatever, it is entertainment. And if it continues being boring, people are going to start to die out. 25% of viewers as at July of 2023 are watching from Netflix Drive to Survive, yeah? So they're not going to be on this. They're not looking to see a lack of uncertainty, Max Verstappen winning every single race. They're going to be, as we talk, gentlemen, they are going to be dialing out as they talk. I know that the Miami viewing figures and the audience attendance figures weren't what they were last year. It wasn't a material downtick, but it wasn't. They're not gangbusters, not going up every year. So we have ourselves a problem, Houston. It's not crystallized just yet, but it's happening now. Hence, Shez, I respond to you and say, I'm not sure that what Lewis said was outrageous. Plus, let me add this to that. As a sports person, is this not just agency, Shez? Is this not just agency? I remarked on a live stream earlier today. If us three were to go out and play some touch rugby or bloody rounders or whatever, I would be, and there were a referee, I would be campaigning like hand over fit. I would be doing everything in my power to bend/break the rules in my favour. And there's nothing at stake there, Shez. Millions of dollars at stake. How can we begrudge Lewis for getting out in front of the camera and saying half of what his rivals would have said at this stage anyway? I think this is sport, Shez. Advantage. Yeah. I hate that Lewis has waited to like round 9 or whatever we're at now. I think he should have been doing this at round 3 and the rest, because Christian would have been where the roles reversed.
So I don't disagree with any of the last bit of that, right? I don't disagree that he should come out and say this, because that's his prerogative and he's saying it for the benefit of his team. So that's why I have full respect for him saying it. I just don't agree with it. So from an F1 fan's point of view, I think it's not a good idea. I think from a Mercedes point of view, I think there's value in asking for it, because it comes with clear benefits for their team by materially hamstringing another team. But that doesn't mean it's good for F1. And I'm gonna just respond to exactly what you said about the viewing figures, right? So two sides to this, right? First is, what effect is any change actually going to have? So if you look at the past in terms of rule changes to peg back a competitor, given enough notice, which is what you would need to do for a change like this. So if you were going to say August the 1st, it wouldn't be until the 2025 car that you're actually going to see an effect on this. So Red Bull have got enough time, and that means that their organization, which is already robust enough to batter through rule changes, will find a way to still come out on top. And the reason for that is right now, the reason they have the quickest car is, again, it comes back to my point about process. The quality of the car and the performances that you see on track are a product of the team that creates all of it. And that hasn't changed, whether you change the rules or not. So materially, I don't think it would make a massive difference. And there's precedent for this when you go back to other eras, right? That actually, Baxty talked about Mercedes being hamstrung by particular rule changes, but actually, after 2016, the 2017 rule changes came in. They actually aced those, and they were still on balance the quickest team across the following 5 or 6 seasons. They then tried to ban party mode. We still had a dominant Mercedes. They tried to ban something else. I can't remember. But then it was only at the DAS. There you go. It was only at the 3rd or 4th time of asking that they managed to come up with a rule change that actually affected the running order. And this isn't just true for Mercedes. If you go back to the Red Bull era, we tried to ban blown diffusers. They were still the dominant team up until the engine rules changed. So I don't think materially, given the team that you're trying to deal with, it will actually make a difference. The second part of this is that you're talking about actual viewing figures, right? So the viewing figures came up high, and we know because 2021 was such a explosive and combustible season. That was a flash in the pan. If you're trying to say that 2021 is the standard at which F1 should always be, you will always fail, because the cycle of F1 is to have dominance. You change the rules, hoping that it will change the competitive order. And it might do that, but you'll just get another era of dominance. 2009 showed us that, 2014 showed us that, and 2022 has shown us that. You change the rules to peg back a competitor, you just find somebody else that's going to be dominant again. So I don't think that pegging back those competitors at the front is actually a long-term solution to fight to get to where you want them to get to. The actual solution for me is to create an environment in which the competitors at the back of the grid have more opportunities, have the same resources to fight the teams at the front. So you then have more teams able to make their ideas reality, to then allow more teams and more variety of competition. That's the only way this is going to work, not by short-term pegging back somebody at the front. It's by enabling the teams at the back to have more to be able to compete. That's how I see this.
Shez, you're such a socialist, and I, my friend, am a capitalist. I'm with you a little bit. There's a couple of things in that I would disagree with before I throw it, Shez. Super quickly. You said that you don't think it will work for F1 fans. Shez, F1 fans are not a monolith. I think we're doing this thing at the moment. I do it all each and every single time where I talk about fans in my own image, and already 25% at the very least aren't like me, nor do they have the length of service and tenure or grey hairs in their beard. So they are, like you said, on the back of the COVID hiatus, on the back of 2021, and on the back of Netflix Drive to Survive. They're here for a very different reason than we are. That's just the truth, right? And I think FIA, as part of their remit, because safety, of course, is always going to be number one on their agenda, but also level playing field competition is absolutely in their remit. And finally, to your point, Shez, I don't think this needs to be... Everything that you said in closing is absolutely on the money, but that's in this this utopian world where, do you know what I mean? Everybody's like, I don't think we'll ever get F1 to that point necessarily where it's like, I don't think it's that way.
Then you won't ever get there. Won't ever get there. But these short-term fixes won't do it for you.
But Shez, what I'm talking about here, because I think, to be precise, I'm not talking about, I don't need to see 10 teams competing for first. I need to see 2 drivers competing for, I don't even care what teams it could be Checo and Max. I couldn't give a fudge, Shez. All that we need to see, so look at me doing the communicating in my own image and gatekeeping, superimposing onto other fans the way that I watch. But the way that I watch F1, I just need to see competition for first, second, and third, right? And to do that, the FI, your point is right, Shez. It's iterative. I don't think there's a silver bullet as at July 2023 that they can just, do you know what I mean? That they can push the button on and nail it. But it's always been iterative, and it will always be iterative. Hence why I think Lewis has absolutely nailed it on both counts, that they kind of need to get moving now. Baxty, come in this, mate.
Yeah, I think what's underpinning all of this, and I'm going to get screamed at for this, but I don't care, is that I think Red Bull are dominating right now and won every single race, and that's partly because Ferrari have regressed from where they were last year. Mercedes dropped the ball and everything else. But Red Bull cheated. They broke the rules. And the punishment doesn't really seem to have affected them. Red Bull are standing there crying foul and going, oh, it's really mean, and they're being mean to us. But the simple fact is you've won every single race this season at an absolute canter. You haven't even been pushed, realistically, apart from Australia, where it was down to safety cars. And I think people are just fed up of watching the same team dominate. Now, people will respond, 2014, 15, 16. I've already explained why that was interesting, because we had 2 drivers fighting it out, and it was personal between them as well. We haven't got that this year. Checo threatened something for 2 races, and then he's failed to get out of Q3, get into Q3 at every single race since Miami. He's completely dropped the ball. So, and I think that's one of the major problems here, is that you got a team that cheated, got punished, but it wasn't severe enough really for what they did. I think they could have gone harder within the minor breach area, with probably a harsher penalty, a much more severe reduction, and everything else. And it kind of grates a little bit. We're coming at it from that angle. Yeah, Mercedes dominated for a long time, but there was always competition. That was always there. Whereas this year there is literally nothing, nothing at all. It's been Red Bull from race one to now. No one's even had a sniff of a race win, and that's what's made this so difficult.
Oh, Baxty, it's not easy, mate. Let's talk about that very quickly then, Shez. Baxter uses some interesting terminology there. Question, because this is the other leg of Lewis's comment, right? The first piece that he was asked was, well, the first comment he made was that it hasn't affected Red Bull at all. The ABA, the 7 percentage points, 10% absolute terms, ATR penalty just hasn't made a difference. Shez, do you agree with what Lewis said? And do you characterise what Red Bull did last year, as does Baxty? Did Red Bull cheat?
In that, yes, they spent more than they were allowed to spend. So by definition, that's cheating. 0.2 millimeters apparently is cheating, and then that gets you put to the back of the grid. So even spending £1 over or $1 over the cost cap is by definition cheating. But the flip side of that is, what material gain is 400k going to have? The level of domination that Red Bull are displaying right now is not because they spent $400,000 more than everybody else was allowed to spend. That's just not real. But whether or not the penalty should be harsher, yes, it should be. But that doesn't change the fact that Red Bull have just done a very, very good job this season and are dominating, I think, on merit, not because they spent $400,000 more. And I'm happy for people to come back at me on that and say, well, actually, when you itemize it, that this is given them 4.5 tenths in lap time. I don't think anyone can tell me that, but if they can, then fine. But yes, the penalty should have been greater, but it doesn't take away from the fact that Red Bull are where they are on merit. But I do want to...
Shez, before you go on to that point, let me ask you this question then, just again, to be super precise with my lingo here, because this is important. It sounds like what you're saying is that Red Bull aren't where they are because they cheated, because I'm hearing the space, Twitter particularly, I've seen lots of comments to the effect that Red Bull are only where they are because they cheated last year.
But that's just it. For the amount that they have been found guilty of overspending by, that does not account for the level of difference in performance they have this season. It's just not possible. 400,000 as a percentage. I mean, you did it in your live stream. $400,000 as a percentage of 145 million, as it would have been last season, is peanuts. Maybe literal peanuts in the case of Red Bull, but it's not enough to give them a second and a half of advantage, is it?
Loving your work, mate. No, I agree with you, Shez. The literal peanuts is not lost on me, Shez. But go on, sorry, I've interrupted your thought process, Shez. You were going to say something else.
Okay, so you're talking about Baxty's talking about Mercedes having an intra-team rivalry that made that narrative compelling in the early part of their domination. Fine. Why don't, if it's that difficult to get other teams to compete at the same level, why doesn't the FIA then mandate that Red Bull can only give their updates to Checo? Like, if we're talking about completely arbitrary rules, if all you're looking for is to level up the playing field,
but you can't do.
Why?
But let's not go into the. I don't think we should get into the absurd, Shez. That's chaos. That's a bit of a non sequitur, I think. You can't do. Okay, you could just get like a bloody, I don't know, a hot air balloon and tack it to Max's number one. Like, do you know what I mean? I don't think it should be absurd. The point that I'm trying to make to you, Shez, is that I think my mind instantly goes back to the end of 2021, right? Q4, those last 4 races, the FIA did everything in their power to not make a decision of consequence or conversely, to make decisions of consequence to force this grandstand finale race where everything was on the line, right? Because they were so acutely aware, and I've beaten this drum for ages, that it was at some point it was going to come to a head. They were going to make a decision for the wrong reasons, and ultimately we saw that at Abu Dhabi 2021. The FIA have not changed, chaps. They are still the same FIA, still the same infrastructure, still liable to make the same mistakes for the same wrong reasons. Wrong reasons being cash rules, everything around me, cream, get the money, dollar bills, you're green. Nothing's changed there, Shez Baxty. And so my prediction, take this to the bank, the FIA, if this continues as is, and Max Verstappen just continues to run away with it for the next bloody 10, 11 races or whatever, they aren't going to go into next season with stasis, but simply because, Shez, they can't afford to.
Sure.
They can't afford to.
But my argument to this is that they can't make an in-season change, right? They can't introduce something that's going to change Red Bull in the middle of a season, because you would need to have unanimous agreement for that to happen. That's how the rules work.
Yeah.
Right. So it would need to be for next season. That means that Red Bull have got enough time to adjust their processes to make it to keep themselves in the same position. And they are a team that are operating at a level above everybody else. It will barely touch them.
Oh, Shez, you might be right, but
so what will end up happening, Cameron, is that you'll just get loads of scattergun changes. Changes. And iterative. All that will happen is that it's not iterative though. It's just scattergun. And all that will happen is that Red Bull will still be dominating, but will have changed the face of F1 for no reason.
Oh, Shez, I think they've got to do something, mate, because it's getting to.
I think they need to. I think it needs to be enable the rest of the have-nots, not disable the big haves, because the big haves will find a way. The have-nots don't have the margin to do anything about it, and they're the ones that will get hurt by this more than anything else. You change this to an August the 1st can't design next year's car. Williams won't have a leg to stand on next season.
Yeah, true. No, I don't hate I think the August the 1st thing is a bit of a misnomer. I don't think that's the idea that needs to get instituted. That's probably like, in order of priority, that's probably like the 6th or 7th one. But whatever the first, second or third iterative rule and reg changes that are going to peg back Red Bull, FIA need to think of them within the next couple of months and look to institute them as soon as possible. That's the point, Shez, because doing nothing, when they be to media, like I've been doing all this study on bloody Greg Maffei on the back of this video, right?
Yeah.
Liberty Media CEO, does not fudge about. He's a venture capitalist through and through. Those guys buy and sell businesses like they're cans of Coke, right? Buying and selling. He wants to talk all this add value stuff. No, those guys are in it and have a history of being in it for the bottom line. So he's not looking to sleep on this momentum. The momentum, like you said, Shez, very eloquently earlier, the momentum on the back of 2021, the Holy Trinity, 2021, COVID hiatus and bloody Drive to Survive is absolute. That's the three of them are almost acts of God together, right? There, you just don't. It's like a lightning in a bottle almost. You can't roll that forward.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't roll that forward, but you can't tell that to the Liberty Media CEO. Good luck, Shez. He's not looking to slow.
But he's not going to get look. This is physics again, right? You can't mandate for physics.
What I'm saying, Shez, is that I don't disagree with you. Yours is a long-term solution. Venture capitalist bods aren't looking to hear that from you, though, Shez. They need it now. They've got to be at the board at bloody financial year end talking about their favourable variances to budget, right? That's all that they care about each and every single year, and I can testify is the wrong word. I can account for that because I've been in circumstances in a professional environment not too dissimilar. Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money, dollar bills.
To come to that, what I would say is that they need to come at it from a different point of view, right? In exactly the same way that your friend Peter Windsor has come at it, in that if you're not seeing the on-track action, shift the focus to something else. because there's a lot of storyline in there that's away from the track that you can still parlay into viewing figures. Drive to Survive doesn't have to all be about this driver versus that driver. There's so much more going on in F1 that you can bring in, and I know that the bottom line is on track action, but having a head-to-head between Adrian Newey and James Allison and having them like the focus of a couple of episodes, that changes the game. It brings in a completely different narrative for people to follow. If one narrative is starting to
hold on, Shez. Who's James Allison and who's this Adrian Newey?
So isn't that the whole point of storytelling? Is that you introduce characters and then you explain what their significance is? That's not my job. That's their job.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's why Alpine have just sold 24% of their team to a media company to try and increase their visibility. That's the whole point of that.
Baxty, let me give you the final word on this before we do a top five, because I could go on back and forth with Shez about this for the next 90 minutes, and that is the length of a football match. Baxty, are we? Because I'm not vehemently against everything that Shez has said, but even as I was talking to Peter, I knew instantly that there were going to be a ton of comments saying, well, Peter, I don't care. Like, I don't care for that. Yeah. Like, I want to see blood and guts, Abu Dhabi 21, a piece of footage like Drive to Survive that's been edited within an inch of its life, and that's what I want. James Allison, who the fudge is that guy? Like, I don't care. Baxty, what side of this fence do you land? Taking off your purist cap for a second, what side of this fence do you land?
At the end of the day, competition breeds excitement. It breeds entertainment, and it breeds interest. And I think a lot of people got into F1 based off 2021 and all of the holy trinity that you've described. And it's going to get to the point where I think sponsors are going to be looking at this and going, what's the point? What's the point? Why should we continue to invest in your product? Because we've got Max Verstappen driving off into the distance every race. It's boring. We don't have a good product right now.
That's just not going to happen. Look,
well, you say that, Shez, but it might.
Alpine if this carries on, sold 24% of their company for $200 million. That values Alpine, I did the maths this week, at $833 million. Who's not going to want to invest in that?
But Shez, to Baxty's point, actually, go on, Baxty.
I'm not talking about the teams. I'm not talking about the teams. People are always going to want to get their business involved in a team, be it sponsorship or investing into a team personally. I'm talking about the actual sponsors of Formula One itself. I'm talking about Liberty Media, the guys that sponsor the races. That they're going to go in there and they're going to, and I still think we are enjoying some of the benefits of 2021. Absolutely. You don't have a consortium with Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney invest in Alpine without that happening in the Drive to Survive and everything else. But if this goes on this year, if this carries on next year, if Mercedes don't get it right in 2024 and don't give us that competition, then people might, investors, they might start to just question it. And sponsors, because as Cam put it, they're sharks. They don't care. They care about bottom line. They do not care about anything else other than that. Being invested in a team is always going to earn you money, but in investing in the sport itself, they're going to be like, no, I'm not interested.
Yeah. So the reason I don't agree with that is because basically you've got at least 5 or 6 blue chip companies that are in F1. So F1 are always going to have people interested because Mercedes is there, Ferrari is there, Alpine is there, McLaren is there. People are going to want to invest in that, in the sport, because those blue chip companies are there, and F1, it's as a brand, will benefit as a result. So and the fact that you have an environment in which those teams can be financially stable and can compete will bring in more people, because there is a financial stability that allows that means that you can invest safely. That's what F1 wants, because that doesn't just bring money to the teams, it brings money to F1 by association. And that's independent of the track action. And that's why what Peter Windsor is saying is 100% on the money. There's so much more to this than just what happens on track. And if you think that the only thing that investors are looking at is, oh, it's not quite as exciting this year and the viewing figures aren't quite as good, but we're losing the big picture.
Oh, Shez, there's so many things that I want to pull you up on there. But fine, let me be quick, super quick. This is, you are right factually in that there will always be corporate sponsors keen to invest in F1, but this is a question of extents and not kinds, right? How much are they willing to invest? And at the moment, if you're going to extrapolate out the growth curve, if we're talking about advertising value, F1 is like crescendoing right now. So what we're doing here isn't saying that, what I'm looking at, Shez, is a forward-focused forecast. That's all that I'm saying, right? And Mr. Maffei, the bloody Liberty Media CEO, is going to want to continue that momentum. Nobody's saying that they're not super high now. They are absolutely at an all-time high in terms of their advertising value. Here's what I'm saying though, Shez. If on the back of 2021, COVID and bloody Netflix Drive to Survive, the impact that those three, the Holy Trinity, have had, if Max Verstappen continues winning like this, it's a matter of when, not if, till all that advertising value, that bottom line, that add value for Liberty Media is it's been unwound as we type, Shez, and it's only going to do further damage. Sure. Hence why I say to you, Shez, in closing, that Greg Maffei, MBS, they're going to be sitting around in a room. They'll be talking to Ross Brawn. They will be sitting, they will be sweating right now. And plus, let me just say this as well, Shez. This is all like, Baxty nailed it a couple of seconds ago. This is all like lagging indicators. You won't see the drop in attendance and viewing numbers, not just yet. Come the end of this season though, when we're looking back, telling you, Shez, as clear as day, if Max Verstappen continues to dominate, imagine he just goes and wins all the remaining races of the season, the advertising value, Shez, will absolutely drop. It's just a matter of how much buy, right? It's not, don't do this, oh, it's F1 and the characters and whatever.
I'm not disagreeing with you. Okay, that might happen, right? But what I am arguing is that you can't change that. This is just the natural order of F1. What you're talking about is doing something that is not going to have an effect. And if they are smart about this, they won't keep trying to go down that route. They will find another way to garner interest in Formula One, because doing what they are trying to do right now is not going to work. Physics does not work that way. And if you're hoping that all of your revenue is going to be based on fans coming in because the on-track action is scintillating all the time, you're going to be disappointed. That's the reality here. And I understand what you're saying, but they're going down the wrong route. That's not how they're going to maximize their return on their investment. It's because it's impossible.
It's techie, Shez. It's techie is what this is. I think we need to continue having this conversation another day, man, because it's attention span. I'll say this in closing. I feel like I've said that a gazillion times already.
Sorry, I had to get that in.
So techie. The competition for clicks in 2023 has never been more fierce, right? People, especially like the fabled 18 to 35 demographic, the bods that Bernie said aren't spending money. The need and the fight to get to their clicks has never been more fierce with TikTok, Facebook, bloody card warzone. Like it's I don't know. It's insidious. It's difficult. And so my argument back to you, Shez, and back to Peter, would be that I'm not sure whether the story behind Adrian Newey versus Allison carries the same weight that Lewis versus Max. Hence why the clever guys at Liberty Media won't even bark, and Netflix wouldn't really. I suppose Toto and Christian, there you go. You got something different there. But like, if you want to get into the stuff that we'd appreciate, myself as a part-time purist, part-time casual, I don't think you've got to understand that the 25% don't care about that. They don't care about Max Verstappen's short cornering. They're not fussed about how I don't know how Lewis pulled off the switchback on Alonso. They don't care about these. And no amount of God tier level storytelling will get someone to care because you could just go on TikTok and in 25 seconds you've got like the most amazing viral clip that you've ever seen in your life. It's easier and it doesn't need translate. It doesn't need a story, Shez, and that's the sort of thing. So Max Verstappen versus Lewis Hamilton in 2021, it doesn't need explaining. One guy's black from the UK, Stevenage. One guy's white from the Netherlands. The fans on either side are super toxic. It doesn't need explain. Just put the pictures up, and it doesn't need explaining or a tweet. It sells itself, and that's the sort of story in 2023 that doesn't need a narrator.
Yes. And if you can get that, if you can get that, great. But I don't. But what they are trying to do to artificially create that again is not possible without a huge dose of luck. Whereas the other narratives that are there are reliable and are still compelling. You just have to create them. But if you're putting everything, you're banking the whole house on a repeat of Lewis versus Max and add in Alonso, you're heading towards the cliff without a parachute.
Yeah, maybe you are, bruv. I'll concede to you on that point, man. The way that you've articulated that, I'll defer to your infinite wisdom on that, Shez. You might have a point. There might be other topics and storylines that they'll need to leave in the meantime until it's Max and Lewis or Charles again. Right, lads, let's talk about top fives as we've gone long. Bloody no, I know that was a bit techie, weren't it, lads? I thought we were gonna get an undivorced, the three of us, but we move all respectful and healthy. I love it. Go on then. Final topic of the day. Should we do a top five? Because I keep on getting requests that we need to argue about top five again. Top five hate points in F1. Reverse order. Who's going first, lads? Because this is going to get techie. And by the way, for the avoidance of doubt, before we close this call, we're going to need to come to some sort of consensus.
Oh, we're going to be here for hours.
On five. Mate, we're going to have to move quick today because we've only got half an hour left. On both the five that are in there and the order. Who wants to go first, chaps? Because this one's going to get techie, I think. They all volunteer. Go on,
not
then,
me.
Shez.
Fine. Okay, so you want my bottom three first, yeah?
Yeah, let's do the bottom three.
Okay.
Five to three.
Okay, so number five. At number five, I've got, wait for it, Ferrari and their wastefulness.
Nice recovery. That's
why. Because they're just so infuriating. They have so much resource and so much going for them, and they manage to trip over themselves every single time. So that's Ferrari. But that is my number five. Okay, so that's the thing of my hates that I hate the least. Is that a thing? Number four on my top five hates is weight. I hate that the cars are so heavy and ponderous because one of our top five loves about F1 was how dynamic it looks, and I don't think you get that with these cars being fat and heavy and slow in low speed corners. I hate that. And my number three is knee-jerk reactions to track excitement, which I think we've talked about in enough detail in the first part of this episode.
Go on. Knee-jerk reactions to what? I didn't even catch it.
Knee-jerk reactions to on-track excitement, bracket, or lack thereof, close brackets.
Okay. All right. We're going to have to... That's going to get techie. I'll tell you from now, Shez. Baxty, have you got a 5 to 3 for me?
I do, yeah, I do. So my number 5 is rising costs for fans. I think Formula One is becoming more and more expensive, primarily to go to. We're hearing horror stories. I mean, I've never attended a race. I would love to attend a race, but I can't because I can't afford to go. It's very, very expensive. And I feel like good, honest fans are being priced out. I mean, some of the things you heard out of Miami were just utterly ridiculous. You saw the picture of the menu doing the rounds, and they were charging, I don't know, $6,000 for like 4-person share of food. I'm like, there might be a slight exaggeration, but it's just ridiculous, that whole situation going on. And you know, good, honest, hardworking fans who earn their money and want to go to races just can't do it because everything is getting more and more expensive, and it's just not fun for anyone. Silverstone this year has been an absolute joke. British fans are finding it cheaper to go to races like Hungary and Spa because they are that little bit more affordable. My number 4 is over-reliance on DRS. And the way I say this is that I think DRS has become too powerful in its overtaking. We've seen that this year. I think cars are now starting to rely on DRS to make an overtake. DRS was only ever supposed to be an aid to overtake. But instead, I think, the Red Bull, I think in particular this year, has been quite keen on this. When you see Max passing, Max has just been like, I'm going to sit on your rear and then I'm going to get DRS and I'm coming past you. First of all, Max doesn't need to do that. He's a brilliant racer in his own right. He could pass you any which way he wants. But I think other cars as well have been maybe a little bit too over-reliant on DRS. My number 3 is the throttling on innovation.
I feel
like every time we see any kind of innovation from a team, the FIA are normally quite quick to go, right, okay, you can have it for this year, but we'll ban it next year. The ones I think of clearly are DAS with Mercedes. I think of the F-duct primarily from McLaren back in the day. There's also the fan-powered car. If these things are not safety issues, which maybe the fan-powered car was, but if these things are not causing safety issues, why are you banning them? Formula One is supposed to be the place for innovation. Why are you then just going, oh, we're just going to blanket ban it? Because somebody's had a moan about it. They don't like the fact that they've got an F duct on the car. Well, we'll just ban it. It just annoys me. Every time somebody comes up with something, they ban it. Blown diffusers for Red Bull.
It's a brilliant example, bruv. Bloody Nora, this is getting techie. As you lot start talking, you just make me doubt my picks. Genuinely. All right, let's go for it. Because this is going to get techie. At number 5, and a lot of these, as I'm reading through them, they're just the same thing, just reworded. So give me a bly, chaps. At number 5, a lack of overtaking. Techie, right? Because I know they say there's been a lot of overtaking, but I'm not talking about overtaking for 19th. I'm talking about overtaking for first position. We're talking about the context, lads, because I didn't do a good enough job of contextualizing around our last top 5. I think we're talking about top 5 hates of F1 in 2023, right? I've got to make this contemporary. I suppose we could broaden it out, but my top 5 list is me talking about things that I hate today. Lack of overtaking. It's the truth, though, bruv. Lack of overtaking for first place. Please sort it out. Somebody, FIA, Mercedes, James Allison, I don't know, but somebody needs to sort this out. Lack of overtaking. Number 5, Cameron F1. Number 4. Fudge, this is so techie. Right, you know what? I had it at number 1 before, but we're gonna argue about order. Toxicity of the community. Now, to play devil's advocate for a second, you could make the case that sports as a community, whether it's football, boxing, UFC, F1, golf, tennis, that everybody is always, there is an element of toxicity, right? And it's, again, a different in extents and not kinds. But from my experience, and maybe because I'm so knee deep in the community as a content creator, from my experience, I've never seen the type of toxicity that I'm seeing in the community at the moment. And it's tiring. And we're not even fighting, lads. Lewis isn't competing for first. So what's it going to be if, God forbid, that happens next year? It's just going to be like, it repels me. It makes me not want to watch. So maybe toxicity of community for me should be a tad higher. And then number 3, oh, chaps, this is going to get tricky. I'm going to have to leave one of the ones that I don't like. Let's be honest, right? I think this is one of the reasons. I'm surprised this was on one of the things, top 5 that you like, Shez. Elitist. F1 is very elitist, right?
Yeah.
It is very, very elitist. And as far as the engineering, it's a double-edged sword. As far as like the engineering and the innovation, that leads to these crazy things that we're like, remember that was incredible. Blown diffuser, double diffuser, like down ground defect. Like these are genius things. But the downside impact of elitist is the fact that none of us 3 can afford to go to a Grand Prix like paddock passes unless we like remortgage the bloody house. And I don't like that. That makes me feel sad. There's other sports. UFC is a brilliant example where you'll still have your corporate level hospitality, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't get a very, very good experience from buying a ticket that's worth a couple £100 as opposed to a 5-figure £10,000 ticket with bloody £50,000 accommodation in Las Vegas. So I don't like the fact that still in 2023, despite the fact that they're saying we race as one and all this other stuff, F1 is both elitist and hypocritical. There we go. That's my number 3, chaps. Do we argue about this now? No, go on. Let's do 2-1 and then we'll argue. Get all the arguing in at the end. Shez, you're going first again, mate. 2-1.
Sure. So my number 2 was lack of transparency in decisions. I'm surprised this hasn't come up in either of your two's lists so far, but the fact that we can have completely out of this world decisions. AD21 was a good example, and there's no accountability from the people that made those decisions. So we didn't have, up until 2020, the stewards and the race director had a press conference after the race. So I don't understand why we don't still have that, because I think it would, number one, make the decisions much more sensible, and second, we would understand sort of what the process was for that decision to be made, and that goes hand in hand with having professional stewards. So I think those two things go together. And my number 1 was actually your number 4, Toxicity. I felt before, certainly before Abu Dhabi 21, that I was a fan of a sport where everyone was sort of fairly respectful and actually maybe quite reserved in their thoughtfulness, and everyone was able to argue quite politely. And I found that that's not the case, and far too many of the arguments that you have online descend into name calling and sort of abject negativity with no logic behind them. I find it really difficult. And the fact that those that are nearest and dearest to me are talking about coming off of social media because of things like that, that tells you a lot about how bad the state of affairs is at the moment.
We're going to have to talk about toxicity, but you know what, Shez, let me just terms and definitions here. Lack of transparency.
In decision making.
So can we just wrap that up in decision making? I've got decision making, but I've termed it something else. Can we just say, is it specifically the lack of transparency, or is it the decision making itself? Lack of transparency more than I can't separate those two, because I don't know what the logic is behind a particular decision, unless it's someone sort of reporting a behind the scenes kind of, this is why we think reportedly they made that decision. And actually, if you had full transparency, then you could make a proper judgment on whether you think that decision was justified or not. Having Martin Brundle on com saying I agree with this, or I don't disagree with, or I don't agree with this, is sort of second-hand confirmation, but it's not the same thing. Fair play, bruv. Don't hate it. This is going to get techie, We haven't got long, lads, but this feels like a 90-minute argument. Incoming. Baxty, talk to me, sir. You're 2-1.
You'll be pleased to know that my 2-1 actually, I think we're going to get unanimous decisions with what I'm about to say on 2 and 1. So my number 2, I've termed it as toxic Twitter,
Mm.
but it's the toxicity within the community. I think that you two have already spoken very eloquently on this. I think what I can add to it is that I think that we are all passionate about the sport, but I feel that the anonymity of Twitter, in some respects, allow you to go out there and say some things that you probably wouldn't say to somebody's face. And I feel like you're always going to have tribalism in sport. It's the nature of it. I mean, look, Lewis Hamilton fans, Max Verstappen fans are the two that we think of when we think of toxicity, but Charles Leclerc fans are very toxic. Lando Norris fans are very toxic. In some respects, Pierre Gasly fans are very toxic as well. Like every fan base has its element of toxicity, and it's normally a small minority as well. But I just feel like sometimes things can get out of hand, and it happens a lot. And I feel the one everyone talks about Abu Dhabi 21, absolutely, but the one for me, actually, where I think it was worse was Zandvoort last year when the whole Yuki Tsunoda Hannah Schmidt thing happened. To be blunt, because I wasn't on this platform last year, and I can say this now, that was a disgrace. And there were people who should know better saying some things that, and with big followings, that just went out there and said the craziest, if excuse my language, shit possible. It was a disgrace, and the abuse that Yuki Tsunoda got, the abuse that Hannah Schmidt got, was unacceptable, and it made the Lewis Hamilton fan base, I'm sorry to say it, look stupid. It made them look incredibly stupid, and it gave all the cult LH memes and everything else. And it's not just Lewis Hamilton fans; there are plenty of fan bases as well. But I feel like that incident in particular really, actually, it upset me. It really upset me. Because I was just like, there were people who should know better behaving like kids. Really, that's what it was. It was childish. Moving swiftly on to my number one. My number one hate is Red Bull, and I only said no. I've only said that for the memes. It's not Red Bull. I wanted to trigger the Max Verstappen fans here, talking about toxicity, and I've just done it. No. My number one is inconsistent stewarding. I feel like is stewarding in general. I think that let's look at the last race in Canada as a perfect example. Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris in any other race in history would have been slapped with a 5-second penalty for unsafe release. Yet for some reason the stewards went, "Nah, it's all right. It's fine. We'll let it go." And I'm like, that's just one example. There was the decision not to investigate Max Verstappen clearly shoving Lewis Hamilton off the track in Brazil 21. There was Checo Perez not getting penalised for shoving Lando Norris off, but then at the very next race, somebody else doing it and then getting penalised. Then I feel like, and Cameron, you've heard me say this before, but I feel like there was a perfect opportunity when Michael Masi stepped down for a new race director to come in and basically rewrite the rulebook. And instead, they carried on with this overinflated, bulky rule set that nobody understands. And I feel like if I was coming in as race director tomorrow, what I would do is I'd say, right, I'm gonna lay down the law. There's going to be no messing around. If it looks like you have shoved somebody off the track, that's a 5-second penalty. If you are released into the path of another car, that's a 5-second penalty. And just be really rigid with the rules so the teams know where they stand, and there can be no argument about it. Yes, you have the right of defense, but chances are you'll throw it out. I also feel like having a rotating thing of stewards doesn't help anyone because there is no consistency. Having different stewards at every race, I would actually employ a full-time stewards. Pay them. You need to pay them. You have to give them the money. They're not going to do it for free, but you need to pay them, and you need to be training as well. And I just feel like it's inconsistent stewarding, inconsistent decision making from the stewards, which actually makes it quite confusing for fans. Because one race, that's a penalty, but the next race it's not.
Love that, Baxty. Let's go. And don't disagree with anything you said there. Go on then. In the name of speed, let me get to my two. And I'm still not sure of the order here, chaps, but actually I am sure of the order. All right. In second place, And this kind of dovetails for toxicity, not toxicity even, sorry, the elitist, hypocritical. Like I said earlier, chaps, a lot of these are dupes, just reworded. So in number 2, a lack of access. And here's what I mean by that. I think the not the community, the teams are so not risk averse, but wary of their commercial value and advertising value that fans just don't even get access to the drivers. Do we really know who, I don't know, Alex Albon is? Okay, so they're doing more stuff these days and it's becoming a thing, more of a thing. Maybe we come back in 5 years' time and this point won't have aged very well. But I still think versus other sports, like the UFC's the other sport that I watch loads of, and you just get so much access to the fighters and the bloody behind the scenes bits and the build-ups. It's not just 2021 where they're going to do like a big build-up piece like Abu Dhabi. Every single week they'll be doing these pieces and you just get to know the actors much better. So I've termed that lack of access. In at number 2 for Cameron. At number 1, and this is going to get techie, I've called this, this is the number 1 of 1,000 names, meaningless platitudes and the depth of expertise. Here is what I mean by that. I listen to a load of podcasts, and the best ones, they're so knowledgeable, super, super knowledgeable. They always come on and caveat that they're by no means Bible, right? They know a lot and have a lot of length of service and tenure, but ultimately seek other opinions, right? Talk to other people because there are other people in the space much more knowledgeable than that. And as an extension of the toxicity chaps, this outcome that everybody bloody knows best. Everybody could design a car better than Adrian Newey. Everybody could jump in a car and drive it better than Max Verstappen. Absolutely does my nuts. I would love to see a little bit more humility in the space, both content creators and F1 Twitter participants, but everybody knows best always. And that cheeses me off more than all the others. There you go. That's my top 5. And that, we can take my top 5, and just parlay into the consensus top 5, surely. Right, lads, let's agree something. So, common denominators, stewarding, toxicity. I think those are the only 2, lads. We're going to have to argue now.
I think elitism as well, like, because elitism, rising costs for fans and all of that kind of, and lack of access, I think, as well, kind of all wrap up into that same sort of
it's not in my top 5, but I'm happy to sack off at least probably the Ferrari one for that. Definitely.
Okay. All right. So we've got three consensus ones, and those are elitism / lack of access, stewarding, inconsistencies, stewarding, or lack of transparency per shares, toxicity in the community. Go on then, fight, chaps. What are the other 2? Pitch me for those final 2 spots because it's going to get techie. Do you want me to remind you of your top 5? That'd be handy.
I can say because 3 of mine have actually gone in. I'm happy to sack off over reliance on DRS because that was a bit of a rogue one. So I will pitch for throttling on innovation. That's kind of my take on it. I suspect I'll probably lose, but I'll try anyway.
Throttling of innovation. Go on then, Shez. What do you think to that? Does that go in your top 5 things that you hate? I'm guessing it might do. No. Shez is not having it. Go on then, Shez. You, instead of that, raise me one of yours.
It's the one that you're not gonna that you're definitely not gonna like, is the knee-jerk reactions to on-track excitement.
Wow, mate! Now we have Houston, we have a problem, mate, because I've got the inverse of that as one of my top things that I hate, haven't I? Go on then, Shez. Like, pitch me on that, mate, before I throw it out of Parliament.
Sure, because I think I'm just going to be rehashing what we said at the beginning of this podcast, but it's the fact that the rule makers see the fans not liking a particular aspect of what's happening on track, so they immediately think we'll make a change and that will have the effect that we think it will have. They don't get the effect they want almost universally, and second, the unintended consequences are that are actually more detrimental than what you had before.
Oh, mate, so I don't... Go on, Baxty.
I was going to say, Shez, do you not think in some way we can tie this in with throttling on innovation because, let me be clear with innovation. When I say, things like, I'm talking about specific, almost like gimmicks on the car, like DAS and F-duct and everything else, which did have effect and performance benefits on the car. But, are they not just knee-jerk reactions as well? Like, they find the easy thing to cherry pick and go, oh, well, Mercedes are only quick in 2020 because they have DAS, so let's ban that. Or McLaren are only quick in a straight line because they've got the F-duct and everything else. Like,
yeah, I mean, I guess I'd be happy to put those two things together, but I felt like what you were coming at it from was more about sort of from a kind of innovation point of view, like you're throttling creative thinking, which I don't think they are. I think it's what I don't want to see is that one year you have DAS and then for the next 5 seasons you've got different teams just trying to refine that one little idea and spending millions and millions and millions on this tiny little thing that gets them 100th of a second. If it has the full benefit, if you see the full benefit of it for one season and then it's gone, I don't really mind that. Rather than what would happen is that you'd have DAS for the rest of that rule set, and everyone would just have it, and then they'd spend millions and millions trying to get the last 100th of a second out of it. I mean, I know I'm just repeating myself again, but I don't see the benefit of that. And the F-duct was essentially parlayed into DRS, so I don't really mind that either. And you made you brought up the BT46, the fan car. That wasn't actually, as far as I understand, that wasn't actually ever banned. It was just that to prevent everyone else in F1 creating an absolute uproar, Bernie Ecclestone withdrew it. He told Gordon Murray, look, we're not going to have it on the car for the next race because I'm trying to create a teams association. And if we've pissed everybody else off because we've got this thing on our car, it's gonna hijack my plans for the championship. So there's always a reason for why things like that happen.
Yeah.
But I don't mind. What I would mind is if DAS had turned up and it had been legal, and the FIA had immediately said that's not legal for no reason and chucked it out. Having it for a season, seeing what the benefit is, and then banning it, I think is absolutely fine.
Well, they banned it. They said to Red Bull, because Red Bull inevitably were the ones that kicked off about it. And basically, the FIA said, okay, you can have it this year, and this was during, I think, at the test. They said, you can have it this year, but after that, gone.
Yeah, so Red Bull have got the opportunity that season if they want to develop it for that season, go ahead and do it. But to see everyone then try and make it a massive performance differentiator, which in terms of what Cameron's talking about in terms of accessibility and ease of access, it's not an easy to understand thing. What is this thing that they're putting backwards and forwards on the steering wheel? What effect is that actually having on the on-track action? Does it have an effect? Maybe, but I don't know what it is. So why spend millions and millions on this thing that nobody understands and can't understand what difference it makes to the on-track action? So that's why I'm like, I don't really have a big problem with the way that works.
So while we terming that, lads, I need to get my thinking cap on here because I'm not sure about.
I think based on what's just happened, I think we'll go with what Shez put forward.
Knee-jerk reactions.
Yeah.
Which Cameron doesn't like.
Well, I would happily get rid of throttling on innovation because I think Shez has rather eloquently explained it and kind of blown my argument out the water. I'll happily concede on this one.
Oh, Baxty, man, you've longed out the podcast by another 45 minutes now. Look, I can't have that, Shez. You know why I can't have it? Because in my list is boring. Let me pitch. I don't think we can have these two in the list, right? Boring seasons and lack of overtaking for first and second can't be in there with knee-jerk reactions to lack of on-track excitement or lack thereof, because they are diametrically opposed, right? One is the soul for the other.
It's not. That's my argument.
All right, fine. Okay, fine. So here's. Oh, Shez, it's techie, man. You're.
What we're here for.
Oh, all right. Let me pitch you on mine. Let me get my international litigator cap on now and pitch you properly. Here we go. I haven't got time, lads, to watch F1. But time is a finite resource, yeah? And no matter how much the Titanic's submersive, right? No matter how much billions you have, you'll never ever be able to buy back 1 second of time. I haven't got time to watch free practice 1, 2, 3, qualifying session, which is another hour, a race which can run up to 2 hours. That's basically a full working day. Just round it up, 7.5 hours. Yeah, I haven't got time to watch that. I haven't with a little one and a wife and bloody content creation and meeting mates and all that other good stuff. If we're at where we are now, and there is no uncertainty. You've been talking about storytelling, Shez. The beauty in story, as I realise as I've walked this content creation journey, the beauty in story is tension and uncertainty, neither of which we have if there is no overtaking for the places that everybody bloody cares about. So how can I justify then my watching, and again, I'm doing this superimposition of the way that I watch, or the prism through which I watch F1, but we have to because this is such a subjective list. How can I justify 7.5 hours, a full working day over the course of like 72 hours or less? How can I justify that if there is no story by virtue of no uncertainty, no tension building, no anything? Surely, chaps, this boring, whatever you want to term it, boring, lack of, in fact, I'm going to upsell the title. Lack of tension is what we're talking about. Lack of tension and uncertainty, ergo lack of story. Let me not trivialize this with the SH1T title that was boring or lack of overtaking. It's not lack of overtaking. This is lack of story over the course of a race weekend slash.
I don't disagree with that.
Bang. Can we just?
But the knee jerk reaction.
Baxty's been convinced. Baxty's been convinced. Put that in the top 5.
I don't see why you can't have. Cameron, I don't see why you can't have both in the top 5 because they're two different things.
Go on then. Can we just get? Let's get a consensus on this one. Can we get 2 or 3 of us agreeing that lack of story? So I've done that. I've repackaged that very nicely. Lack of story, whatever that means, and that can mean many different things to many different people. But lack of story of us, as I've just framed it. Can we agree that has to go in the top 5? Por favor.
If it was actually a thing, I would have it in there. But I think there are plenty of storylines in F1 at the moment. Whether they are presented to you in the way that you want them to be is a different matter. But there are plenty of storylines there.
All right, it's true. But let me throw in an adjective then. Lack of God-tier stories. Lack of God-tier stories. That's the crucial objective that I'm talking about. Remember we made a differentiation earlier on, Shez. The difference between a story, a God-tier story like a Lewis versus a Max that just writes itself and doesn't even need explaining. That if you did write it in a book, people wouldn't even believe you. The likes of a Senna, a Prost, a Hill versus a Schumacher back in the day.
Cameron, can we just cut to the chase here? What you want, what you're saying you hate is not having competition for the first step of the podium.
I think it's that I've termed it as...
That's what you're saying.
No. I don't think it's that. It's not... That's trivializing it, Shez.
But everything you said points to I want to have a fight.
Of course it does. Of course it does. But translated into terms, into this... What I mean here, for the sake of this argument... is story, bruv. We're talking the God tier ones, and it just so happens that in the sphere of F1, the God tier stories are always between the best drivers, right? And it happens 9 times out of 10 for first and second. Baxty, can you just co-sign me off so we can move on to the next one, please?
You had me.
Oh no! Say it's not so.
And then Shez said something.
Oh, Shez. Why?
And it's got my brain ticking. So when Shez said there is still story in F1, and I'm thinking, what have we been doing really since 2014? We've been appreciating greatness.
This is why Baxty's my mate.
I'm both of your mates, by the way. I'm not sure I will be in a minute. But I think what we're witnessing this season is greatness, and that's one of the stories of the year. I think that's why I'm kind of siding with Shez, that there is still enough story there. It's not God tier, I agree, but we are watching a guy rise through the ranks of the top 10 list in Max. That's one of the stories of the year. I mean, he started the season for me outside of the top 10. He's now number 8 in the top 10. Number nine. Sorry.
So Baxty, let me just confirm. I'll just play back to you what you said to me, because again, for the avoidance of doubt, what I'm looking to include in our top 5 consensus list, all agreed and signed off Magna Carta settings, is lack of God tier story. What I've just interpreted from what you've fed back to me there, Baxty, is that we're saying that Max's ascendance to perceived greatness is in 2023 June of. Is a God tier story. Is that what we're saying?
No. I'm not saying that. I never said that. That's not what I said.
Okay.
What I said was that that's one of the stories of the year. We've also got the Mercedes fight back. We've got the complete clown show that is Ferrari. We've got Aston Martin and their rise, and Fernando Alonso's rising.
Oh my God, these are mind-blowing stories.
No, but
I wouldn't go that far, Shez. What I say is they are.
Thank you.
They are stories that appeal to us as the purist.
But there is a
story just before you go, for the sake of the judge and jury, can I just restate my initial argument, and that is lack of God tier story in 2023. If you guys are going to pitch me on any of but pitch me on which one of those is a God tier story, and then I'll happily concede.
Cameron, why does a God tier story have to be an on-track story? Why?
Just
explain that to me.
I'm not saying that it needs to be.
Because to me,
you tell me which. You tell me the God tier story.
Okay, so
I will concede.
So okay. Classic sports story, right? Rocky. Classic sports story is.
What's this got to do with
anything? Wait. Established. Great legend.
All right,
gets taken on by somebody that is a nobody.
All right, Ted. Behave yourself.
That's what it is. So to tell me that the story of Mercedes, James Allison having his team rock bottom, maybe not rock bottom. I think that I'm over egging the custard here, but having to fight back against the might of Red Bull, with everything that they represent, Adrian Newey, all of that. The story of Mercedes having to fight back and take them on again to regain their perceived rightful position at the head of the table. That's not compelling to you?
Baxty, is that compelling to you in on the 30th of June 2023?
It is, but not yet. We're in the like opening chapters of the book, and the meaty stuff I suspect is probably going to come next year. But
can't have it every season.
As at now, lack of God tier story.
Wow, we've wangled that one in.
How do we not put that in, Baxty? Please, for the can we just. But then I think you need to. But then I think you need to put Shez's point in. I think you can have them there. The question is,
what order? I don't mind mine being below yours. I don't know.
Can we deal with one thing at a time here, lads? Because can we just get story in, please? Please.
We've just agreed to it, but on the proviso that Shez's knee-jerk reaction gets in.
Oh, for crying out loud! Let me just see where I just want to see if there's something else that can go ahead of this knee-jerk reaction that we've got in our list. Throttling of innovation.
No, I've already been blown out of the water. Yeah.
Oh shit! Are we not including my meaningless platitudes and depth of expertise?
No, I think that comes higher.
Yeah, that could go.
I really like that one.
So then this is where we've only got one space, and it needs to be. It can't be on the proviso of Shez's one.
But why can't Toxicity be bundled up in it? Because I definitely think that's a toxic trait.
I don't. Is it toxic? Lack of
I
expertise.
think the fact that it yes, man, because the amount that like uninformed opinions then feed the sort of baiting of either side of an argument, of either side of a tribe, as it were. I think those two things are part and parcel of each other, and your meaningless platitudes, however you want to label that, definitely needs to be in our top 5.
I agree with that. I think you can put that in the toxicity umbrella, because there are so many people in the platform, be it in podcast or just Twitter in general, that they present themselves as knowing everything, but they know absolutely nothing.
Which is chaos and disingenuous. I would say, also hands up for that. I know zero, lads. I think coupled into that, I don't want to say it's a lack of humility. There are so many bloody levers and threads to pull out in this one. I think there is a thing where almost a lack of expertise. Please see Pit Stop Podcast is almost celebrated, right? And again, this goes back to the old cash rules, everything around me, clean, get lack of access and all these other things. So they're linked here, but I just don't like the fact that I've never heard anybody, there's very few people in the space that kind of approach it with, especially on bloody Twitter, that approach the thing with some humility and just say, well, listen, like, like Shez, you'll always offer out a question and say, Blake, what's this thermal deg, tire deg thing about? There is a humility and an endearing within that. I love to see that, because you're saying, I know fudge all. And like, but I want to know and educate me. Like, there's a humility and a beauty in that. And I think I would be, like, the lack thereof, quite literally, I recoil back from that. It really gets someone else. All right then, lads, without further ado, we have ourselves a top 5. Bloody no, we got there in the end, kind of. Now we just need an order, which is going to take another 60 minutes, eh? It can't. Everyone is going to get and divorce. All right, quickly then. We have a top 5. Knee-jerk reactions to on-track excitement as far as adjustments to the rules and regs.
Are you pitching that at number 5?
I'm reading them out for now. But I might have to pitch them out at 5. But go on. All right, so knee-jerk reactions, story / overtaking, or whatever else that means, elitism / lack of access, stewarding, and toxicity / death of expertise. In at number 5, Baxty, you are putting which one of those?
I'd probably put the knee-jerk reaction in at 5. Yeah.
Boom. I thought we were going to have... Mate, that's too easy. What's going on with that? All right. Actually, let me just... Do I need to play Devil's Advocate story? Nah, there's no Devil's Advocate to be played. Now, number 5, knee-jerk reactions to on-track excitement or lack thereof. In at number 4, lads, let me read out the remaining ones. Shez, you get first picture at this. Story, elitism / lack of access, inconsistency of stewarding / lack of transparency, toxicity / death of expertise. Your number 4 is...
Mate, it's going to be the storylines thing, because
how dare you?
Marginal in the first place.
Oh, behave yourself. Behave yourself. Baxty, to that you say what?
I agree with Shez.
Story. Oh,
that wasn't your banker though, was it, Cameron?
Oh, Shez.
I love these. I love them so much.
This is risk deja vu last time, isn't it? Do you remember that?
And whichever Lewis Hamilton one it was.
Oh yeah,
Abu Dhabi 2014.
Oh yeah. There's always one.
But it goes from being like number 4 to gradually climbing up to be the thing we hate the most, and it definitely isn't.
No. I think that the bottom 2 were the ones that we had to argue over, where there was a very clear consensus on 3 that we all kind of agreed on. So I feel like they should be the top 3.
Yeah, I think so.
I think I want to argue for story at 3.
Over what?
You can argue.
Stewarding. So here's why. Okay, let me pitch you very quickly, and I'm happy for this to be thrown out of court on grounds of ridiculousness. All right, look, Stewarding in 2023. Stewarding has been bad historically, and I don't think anything's changed. But the racing has been so SH1T that we haven't seen a massive. The frequency of dodgy instances. So yeah, Lando and Louis, like there's been a couple of them, but they're not of any consequence yet because it's not been as juicy, right? I'm not saying that it's not there. I'm saying that it's simmering beneath the surface and there haven't been noteworthy instances in 2023 to where it's more, it requires more hatred or is more hate-worthy than a lack of story. Hence why I think lack of story should at least be in 3 over. Go on, Baxty, talk to me.
I just want to politely remind us of the Fernando Alonso crap show in Saudi Arabia where they took the podium off him and then they gave it back to him.
Oh, it's so embarrassing.
It was just the stupidest thing ever. And that alone for me puts inconsistent stewarding above stories.
Okay. Conceded. I can sit begrudgingly. 3 gritted teeth. I will put story at 4. And then what are we saying at 3? So the remaining ones, elitism, lack of access, stewarding, toxicity, death of expertise. What's our number 3?
I would say lack of stewarding at number 3. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
What are the other ones we've got left? So we've got.
So you got toxicity and elitism / lack of access. I'm doing a long one here. I need to read out the full names because I think they're important. Elitism / lack of access and toxicity, aka death of expertise.
Because we've got three spots left, right?
Steward, yeah. So 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, I think stewarding.
Bang, done. All right, cool. So we've got a top of 5 to 3. Then knee-jerk reactions to on-track racing, lack thereof, in 2023. Story or lack thereof at 4. There's a trend. Stewarding, lack thereof in at 3. 2 and 1. Your remaining contenders, gents. Baxter, I'll come to you first. Toxicity / the death of expertise, or elitism / lack of access. Gatekeeping, I think, is the umbrella term for that, isn't it?
I would go toxicity followed by elitism.
So toxicity is your number 2?
Yeah.
Oof.
Because I feel like the rising price, I've thrown rising prices into this elitism thing. I think that's going to get worse. And this is something that I think we're going to talk about a lot in the years to come. Yeah, as I said, Miami is the big one, and American races in general. Well, COTA aside, because COTA is catered towards things. But I mean, I saw some. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Double Waved Yellow who said this, but somebody he was at Montreal 2 weeks ago, and they said it's not just the racetrack and everything that goes around that; it's the cities as well that they are basically upping everything because they know the F1's in town for the weekend and people are going for the week and everything else. And
so, but Baxi, that happens anyway. Like I went to Mayweather Pacquiao in Vegas.
Did you?
Yeah, mate. But the only way that we were able to afford that is by booking preemptively, right? We had no chance. If we'd booked that, if we'd left that 24 hours, we booked basically on a hunch that they were going to announce it within the next 24 hours. If we'd left it, say like 2 days, 72 hours, there's no way we would have been able to afford anything, flights or accommodation. So I don't know, I'd only be one to defend like F1 and they say that they're not elite. That's nonsense. But I'm just saying, I think in that sense, they're not anomalous, let's say, Baxty. Which is why I think, for me, I'll chime in before you do, Shez. Toxicity, in retrospect, I'm rejumbling my order massively. I don't think toxicity can go anywhere but number 1, in my humble opinion, because elitism, for what it is, elitism is not great, but it's always been there, right? From my perspective, it's always been F1. It's almost like you can't have F1 without, it's almost like that's everything that I've ever known. Elitism is kind of synonymous almost with everyone. And that's not to say it's not a bad thing and worthy of hate, but toxicity, chaps. Elitism, I've never looked at F1 and said, oof, you know what? This might be a bit too elite for me to even watch this thing. Toxicity, though, fellas, honestly, Toxicity could have me just cancelling off the old Sky F1 subscription. Hence why I think Toxicity, depth of expertise, lack of humility, the community more broadly, absolutely number one in my humble opinion. Respectfully, Baxty, I disagree there. Shez, to that you say what, sir?
First, I'm enjoying watching two other people argue for once.
What's he on about? Go on then. There was no argument there, just a respectful disagreement. Shez, your number one is?
Yes, Toxicity. It has to be. It's not something that was there before to any great extent that I could see, but as soon as events happened on track that have separated fan bases to such a massive degree, and it was happening throughout the season in 2021, it just makes being a fan of the sport just so much less pleasant. And the fact that there's so many unqualified armchair warriors, it just makes it really difficult to separate the wheat from the chaff. But I mean, I guess on the flip side of that, when you do find a well-reasoned, knowledgeable podcast or someone to listen to, or someone that, as you say, is humble about where they're coming from, it's a breath of fresh air. But the fact that you have to hunt so hard now to find that, I don't like. And the absolute battleground that Twitter has become is just it's not pleasant.
It's jarring, mate. Yeah, it puts me off. Is the best way. Do I love F1 so much that I need to be in and around? Because even Shez, I will say this, even when like I want to say like Silverstone, Monza's probably a good example. As soon as I didn't even need to check social media, right? As soon as Monza happened, so quickly after
Silverstone, yeah.
I was just like the burden of like, I didn't even need to check social media, but the weight of like perceived toxicity just like engulfed me. It was suffocating almost. I don't know. Baxty, let me pitch this at you very quickly, finally, on this. I think we've got our order, and our order is number 5, knee jerk. Number 4, story, lack thereof. Number 3, stewarding, lack thereof or inconsistency of. Number 2, elitism. Number 1, toxicity. On toxicity, Baxty, I want you to check my maths, bro, because I feel like we might have been a bit harsh on F1 here. As a Spurs man, as a chap who consumes a lot of other sports, and again, one of the most toxic ones in football, am I victimizing F1 for just being a sport? Is that just what happens with sports? Or are me and Shez barking at the right tree, and F1 is particularly toxic versus its other sporting counterparts?
I don't think it's any less toxic than football, say. I mean, I think the problem is I feel like, and particularly during COVID, I mean, I only really got into the Twitter side of things properly last year, but I remember really engaging with people for the first time post Abu Dhabi 2021, which of course that was a bonfire of emotion that day, as we can all probably imagine. And I feel like a lot of the community is based on social media, and we now all have a voice, which is great in some respects. But I feel like for guys like us, we watched the race, but we've now become ingrained in the community, and therefore I feel like it becomes part of our experience, engaging with people and chatting to them. I'm very fortunate, and this is one of the reasons why I said the community was actually one of my big things why I love F1. But unfortunately, the toxicity goes hand in hand with it. And you're always going to get that with any sphere of life. So no, I don't think you're picking on F1 unnecessarily, but I feel like because of where we are as, small, so some bigger than others, but small figureheads within the community and people that come and listen to our content, we kind of have the social media side as part of our experience now. And unfortunately, yeah, it is toxic, and it does make watching the sport at times difficult. Football toxicity that's just part and parcel of the thing. You're going to have rivalries with other teams, and those are hundreds of years deep in some cases. Tottenham and Arsenal have been rivals since the late 1890s, I think. So, and the same with rugby. You've got these historic rivalries that literally is just based on geography. This, on the other hand, seems to be just people supporting one driver over the other, and it's very, very partisan. And it's it's one, or supporting one team over the other, or vice versa, and it's that's where I think F1 gets it wrong.
Baxty, I'll say it's interesting that you use the comparison of rugby, because this is an argument that I used to have every single day of the week. The difference between football fans, the referees, we all know that chant, a banker, replace the first letter with something different, a letter that comes after V, versus rugby fans who would never, there's kind of like, obviously there is still that inter-team rivalry, right? But a rugby crowd, I've never ever heard a rugby crowd boo a referee as an example, because it's just not, maybe they do it nowadays and it's gone a bit techie, but back in the day, rugby union especially, there was like almost like there were rules of engagement. There was an etiquette to the banter. And I'd pay a lot of money if we could somehow institute that within F1. I'm not saying I want the rivalry to go away. I love a little bit of banter, but there is no, it's death almost. It literally is like the House of Lannister versus the House of Stark in Game of Thrones. It's like, I want you to die, and I hate it.
Isn't that to do with like the volume of interest though? That like the number of fans that are invested in football versus the number of fans that are invested in rugby is just an order of magnitude different, right? So you're admitting a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds and ways of expressing themselves versus
that second point, Shez. Yeah, it's that second point. We talked about this the other day offline, right? I think the demographic, as far as like, I won't say background or I think it's an appreciation for the sport over and above, right? Some people, here's where the toxicity comes from, in my humble opinion. I think some people don't really not care about F1. That's harsh, and I'm gatekeeping here again, like perpetrating one of the things that we've just put on our list, epitomising it even. But I think, and this is fine, right? Some people are Lewis Hamilton fans or Max Verstappen fans before they're fans of F1. And I think if you see the sport through that prism, that will colour the way in which you interact with a fan from the other side of the pond, right? Whether that's Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton or Alonso or whoever. If you're just here because you like Lewis Hamilton, take Mama Cameron as an example. The second that Lewis Hamilton retires, chaps, she will never watch another steering wheel turn ever again in her life. She's just not interested. She's not an F1 fan. She's a Lewis Hamilton fan. And again, when I have the conversation about F1 with my mom, I'm not saying that Mama Cameron is toxic, but I get the same kind of like toxic tropes. Oh, I can't stand that Max Verstappen. Get him off my screen. Why did you put Max Verstappen in your video so much, David? I can't stand him. Well, Mom, because he's very good. That's why, and because he's the story. Oh, David, get him. Like that sort of thing is a function of basically the way that you watch F1, right? So I understand it in that sense. Go on, Baxty.
I've had 2 moments of clarity that have convinced me that toxicity should go number 1. An incident from this year and an incident from many years ago. So the incident from many years ago that I think of, which sums up toxicity within the fan base, and it's been sitting there bubbling under the surface. We didn't really have social media back in 2008 at testing when the Fernando Alonso fans did what they did to Lewis. I won't repeat because it's not what those guys are not worth my time. But the other one this year, and I think it was from Miami, was when you had the Sergio Perez fans in the stands flipping off Red Bull and Max Verstappen. That's their own team they're flipping off, by the way. because of Checo, but they were flipping off Max Verstappen. And yeah, we've seen it before: Seb getting booed, Nico Rosberg getting booed. Yeah, I know that was a bit pantomime-y, but it was still a bit unnecessary. You know, Lewis has been booed a couple of times, Max has been booed a few times. Yeah, we don't really need to do that. We need to appreciate that these guys are putting their lives on the line every time they drive. And okay, yeah, I've convinced myself, but you guys have also convinced me. Toxicity, number one.
We will take it. And on that bombshell, chaps, we will close. Just before we go into the closing outro spiel, I just want to say a lot of the stuff that we talked about with the depth of expertise and humility and understanding that ultimately that none of us in here, not on this podcast or in the space more broadly, a Bible. There will always be an Adrian Newey or Ross Brawn. There will always be somebody in this space that knows more than you. And I parlay that into this, chaps. I'm infinitely grateful to both of you for doing this podcast nearly every week at this point, because you guys are absolute gold, ridiculous God tier copy. Your knowledge and your memory of instances is just like far beyond anything. So I appreciate anything that I could ever reach. So I appreciate each and every single time that we jump on the podcast, and you carry me. my very small noddy racing mind. Genuinely mean that sincerely. And on that bombshell, chaps, we shall end it. I feel like I've been a bit. I've done the humility spiel there. I'm all right. I know a little bit. I've been watching, but again, you guys, there's not a time that we don't come in here and shake down, and that I don't learn and absorb more from you guys each and every single time. And on that bombshell, finally, we will say good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I've loved that episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed it too. If indeed you have, and you are listening from a podcasting platform, do me a favor, scroll to the top. 5-star reviews each and every single day, because this year, we're going purple, just like RB19 and Max Verstappen. From co-host Shez at ShezMed on Twitter, for Baxty B, Baxty BF1 on the YouTube, sick content as always, Baxty B on the Twitters. I've been Cameron F1. Like, comment, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. We'll see you same time, same place next week. Between now and then, remember, as always, enjoy the racing, but look, but never stare.